It's been a month since I've launched this channel, and I think it's time I said something about my intentions. What prompted me to become a YouTuber was the intellectual awakening that I witnessed happening on YouTube, particularly in response to the rise of what is now being called the regressive left. I've been following this new awakening for a while, but it felt to me that something was missing. The existing YouTube channels are doing a very good job at criticizing, debunking, and ridiculing the regressive left, but there's not much effort being put into trying to formulate a truly liberal alternative, a coherent set of values that is up to date with the realities of today. The regressive left has twisted and perverted liberal concepts to the point where they turned against themselves, and even true liberals are now confused by them and don't know which values they should uphold. My background is in philosophy, and I intend to use this background to attempt to untangle the mess that leftist thought has become and help put us on steady ground again. In this video, I chose to criticize Sargon of Akkad, one of the leading intellectual voices in this new movement to save liberalism. Sargon is most famous for his show This Week in Stupid, in which he presents a weekly review of everything stupid in today's Western spirit, more than 90% of which coming from the regressive left. The show is the best and most comprehensive introduction to the detestable ideals and tactics of the regressive left, and is also highly entertaining to watch. But that means that Sargon's videos, by nature, are focused on the negative. He does not present a fleshed-out worldview that will provide a positive alternative. He generally says that he believes in the ideals of classical liberalism, but he doesn't spend much time elaborating on how these ideals should manifest themselves in today's world. When he does make counter-arguments, I find them to be incomplete, bogged down by incorrect language, and occasionally self-contradictory. Which is fine because, as I said, his channel is dedicated to exposing the regressive left, not to thinking beyond that. But I think the time has come that we do take that extra step, and make a more concentrated effort to say not just what is wrong with today's left, but also what today's left should be about. In this video I'm going to discuss a couple of examples where I think Sargon's arguments are not completely thought out, and I hope it will help us make a clearer argument. In the past few months, Sargon has been focusing mainly on the refugee crisis in Europe, particularly on how the regressive left is stifling any attempt to have an honest discussion on the issue. One of the things that he is most annoyed at is the regressives' refusal to criticize the attitudes held by these refugees, a refusal which is driven by two regressive ideas. First, the idea that refugees are an oppressed minority group, so any criticism of their culture is a form of bigotry. Second, the idea that morality is a relative thing, so we have no right to criticize the customs of another culture even if we perceive them as immoral. In his video titled Attitudes Within the Refugee Crisis, Sargon had this to say about it.
So this is my problem with all of this, is the willful dishonesty on the part of Western politicians to the idea that, yes, some cultures are in fact inferior to our own, and they actually do have retrograde opinions and attitudes regarding women. I mean, the guy literally said that if he wants to rape a woman in his country, the police will do nothing about it. Feminists, I don't know whether you pay attention, but that is actually a rape culture. And again, I know I've been hammering this issue, but I really think this is the crux of the problem. It's that these guys don't think what they're doing is wrong. And they hold these opinions because their cultures, frankly, are backwards. They're fucking awful cultures. They treat women in a terrible, terrible way. I can't imagine being part of a culture where 90% of the women have their genitals mutilated. I can't imagine what it's like to be part of a culture where it's actually okay to rape someone. The police aren't going to punish you. Nobody's going to bat an eyelid apart from her brother or whatever, and he may well end up honor killing her because she disgraced herself. Look, I am not a cultural relativist. I do not think that all cultures are inherently equal and they just need to be understood. Some cultures are worse than others. Some cultures are even worse than those cultures, and some cultures are downright barbaric.
Okay, this is the first thing that I want to talk about. Sargon has repeatedly attacked cultural relativism, describing it as a regressive left notion that is preventing us from defending the rights of minorities in Muslim societies. I, on the other hand, consider myself a cultural relativist. What I am not is a moral relativist. And I think that this is a much more useful position to hold, whereas denouncing cultural relativism, as Sargon does, will lead you to positions I'm not sure you want to subscribe to. First of all, when you say that you are not a cultural relativist, that usually means that you think that your culture is the right culture and all the other cultures are wrong. But that's not actually Sargon's position, as we've heard in this segment. He believes that there's a hierarchy, in which some cultures are better than others. For instance, that Western culture is better than the cultures in North African countries. But that raises questions. Was it also better in the first half of the 20th century, when it was responsible for 2 world wars, totalitarianism, the Holocaust, and weapons of mass destruction? Are you sure that it's not going to go crazy again in the future, and be worse than others? If we start creating cultural hierarchies, they might be abused by forces who want to impose their culture on others. That's not something we should be doing as liberals. Finally, culture is not just moral values. If you say that your culture is better, you're basically saying that your food is better, your music is better, your manners are better, etc. I don't think that this is really the position that Sargon or most of us want to be in. What Sargon does actually mean, I believe, is that he is not a moral relativist. The moral relativist argument is basically that morality is a social construct, so every culture has the morality that is suitable for it, and therefore you should not impose your moral code on another culture. The moral absolutist, on the other hand, would say no. Morality is universal. It only manifests itself differently in every culture, but if we follow the logic of every culture's moral values, we will find that they are all based on the same set of fundamental moral laws. Laws like thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not rape, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not betray, and so forth are the basis of every moral code, and we can actually reduce them all to one fundamental moral law. Thou shalt not cause unjustified suffering. This is what morality is about, not causing suffering unless it is justified. And the only moral justification for causing suffering is if it is the only way to prevent greater suffering. And this is also what explains why different cultures have different moral codes. The internal logic of their culture leads them to believe that certain acts that cause suffering are necessary to prevent something worse, and therefore justified. So if, for instance, you would ask someone why their culture bans homosexuality, thus causing suffering for its gay people, they will probably answer that homosexuality has a corrupting effect on society. If you inquire why that is bad, they will probably reply that a corrupt society eventually loses its social order. If you further inquire why this is bad, they will probably say that in a social disorder there is more crime. And if you ask why that is bad, they will say that more crime produces more suffering. And after that, there is no need to inquire any further. We all agree that preventing greater suffering is what morality is about. Let's take a monumental crime like the Holocaust. Why did the Germans feel they had the right to kill Jews? Because they believed that they were acting in self-defense, convinced that the Jews were conspiring to destroy their society and take over the world. So, you see, even the Nazis actually obeyed universal morality, believing that they are preventing a greater evil. Which brings us to the question, how can we condemn them? If the beliefs of their culture led them to conclude that the Jews were a danger to them, how can we say that the Nazis committed an immoral crime? Well, let's think of a case when someone kills someone else and claims he did it in self-defense. Will we just accept it? No, we will investigate to see whether he had reasonable grounds to believe that the other person presented a danger to him. The same thing goes for World War II Germans. When we investigate the beliefs about the Jews, we see that they were based on falsehoods, and furthermore, that applying reason to the information that they had should have revealed to them that these were falsehoods. Therefore, what they did was a crime. And this is how you deal with what you perceive as immoral ideas and customs of another culture. You attack them with reason. When talking to someone from that culture, don't tell them that their culture is inferior, but ask them to explain why they think that they have the right to do the thing that caused suffering. If they reply that this is the morality of their culture, don't let them get away with it. If it's their culture, they should be able to defend it rationally. And once they start using rational arguments, they are in the realm of reason, in which their views can be criticized and dismantled. If we go back to the example of those who claim that homosexuality corrupts society, ask of them to provide proof for that claim, and then you can use logic and empirical evidence to undermine their arguments. Now some people won't listen to reason, and in their case you'd better not waste any time arguing with them, but most people are reasonable, and most people are moral. So if you demonstrate to someone that a certain idea or custom that they have cannot be reasonably defended as moral, they will be driven to change. They can either decide that their culture sucks and choose to leave it, or they can reinterpret its core values in a way that is still faithful to it and also consistent with morality. In any case, it will be an improvement. In summation, cultural relativism is a liberal idea to counter cultural supremacy. It basically says that no culture is superior to other, and every culture has the capability of being moral. One culture may be more moral than the other at a given time, but that doesn't mean that there's something inherently wrong with the latter and that it can't improve. But the regressive left has expanded the notion of cultural relativism and took it too far, into the realm of moral relativism. In moral relativism, you no longer demand of every culture to be moral, because you believe you have no right to determine what morality is. They have perverted leftist thought by claiming that this is what cultural relativism actually is, and Sargon, by using the same definition, is unwittingly helping them. This is what I want to fix, because this is why I believe liberals should make their stand. Liberals should uphold the idea that morality is universal and above any culture, and every culture must adhere to it. Doesn't matter which country you come from, doesn't matter if you are religious or atheist. You should always interpret the tenets of your culture in a way that is most consistent with the fundamental moral laws. This position, I believe, is the most effective in fighting against retrograde ideas and customs. Now, elsewhere in the video, while discussing evidence that the migrants are responsible for a spike in sexual crimes in Europe, Sargon says this.
Well, what a fucking surprise. Men from countries where they think very little of women and often mutilate them or oppress them are actually far more likely to rape them and in far greater numbers.
The attitudes and opinions that the migrants have towards women is what Sargon, understandably, focuses on most of all. In another video that he made titled Sweden's Rape Culture, Sargon opened by saying this.
So in this video I will be talking about the continuing Islamization of Sweden and the rape culture it is producing.
Well, which is it, Sargon? Is it Islam, as you claim in this segment, or is it the cultures in those countries that the migrants come from, as you claim in the previous segment? If you say that the problem is Islam, then you have to show where the Muslim faith teaches that it is okay to rape women. As you say yourself in those videos, different Muslim countries don't all have the same retrograde attitudes in regards to women. And if you say that we should focus on those countries that have these attitudes, then you'll have to concede that they are not all Muslim. In the first video you mentioned that such attitudes are prevalent among migrants from Eritrea, a country which has a Christian majority. And if that's the case, then why are you talking about Islam? You are trying to argue that migration from Muslim countries is unique, that it is somehow different and worse from other immigrations we've experienced. But whether you focus on Islam or on the cultures in their origin countries, it seems that your argument doesn't hold. So what is it that makes it unique? The answer, quite obviously I think, is that it is a combination of both. The attitudes they bring from their home countries could have been tolerated, but when you combine them with their Muslim faith, it results in a unique problem. Every migration from a less developed country has brought problems with it, due to the retrograde attitudes held by the migrants. But we know from experience that these problems are temporary, and every immigrant group eventually integrates into society. So we've learned to tolerate these problems and accept them as an inevitable phase. What makes Muslim immigrants unique is that there are forces within the Muslim world that are encouraging them not to integrate, to hold on to their attitudes. That's what makes Muslim immigration more problematic, pardon my French, and that's why it should be discussed in a different way from what we've known in the past. When we come to discuss this sensitive issue, we should be mindful of this distinction, otherwise we might find it very hard to defend our position. These, then, were two examples of how I believe that clarifying our definitions would help us form better arguments in trying to create an up-to-date liberal discourse. This is one of the things that this channel will be dedicated to achieving. Sargon is going to keep on bringing you the stupid. I'm going to try to give you something else.